All right, Shalom. Hey, let me get straight into this lesson. So, um, I'm gonna prove that Paul and Moses was so-called black men. They was Israelites, right? They was not so-called white men, and that's going for everybody else in the Bible, right? So when you go to Google, right, you put in Apostle Paul, this comes up, right? Let's go here. So-called white men, and this is heavy witchcraft on your mind. And this is why most of our people, when they think about the Bible, they think about it being a so-called white man book, right? Because they don't know better and they've been brainwashed. It says Paul the Apostle, right? Check this out. I'm going to show you something very interesting, right? So they got this image here, right? So for all these images, in most cases, they have a person who drew this image and they got a date to it. So this image right here was created in 1611. It says by Peter Paul Rubens. Let's go to this devil, right? It says Peter Paul Rubens was a Flemish artist and diplomat. So that's when you got something called the Renaissance, when a so-called white man would bring these images, like he would act like the people out of the Bible and create images to replicate that, right? And when you have images, you can brainwash people, right? So this image was created in 1611. This is a new concept, right? And it was painted by this guy Peter Paul Rubens, right? So this all heavy witchcraft, but you go to Google, that's supposed to be a trusted source of information, but it's nothing but lies. So I'm gonna prove to you that Paul was a so-called man of color. He was a dark-skinned man, right? And Moses. So we're gonna just deal with those two. So let's go here. Show you something. I want you to keep up with me. Right, so I'm pulling this information for the Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary. If you want to go grab one, you need to have this. All right, let's get straight into it. Ham. I'm going to show you something else too. It says Ham. It says the youngest son of Noah, born probably about 96 years before the flood, and one of 8 persons to live through the flood. He became the progenitor. What does the progenitor mean? He was the father. It says of the dark races, not the Negroes. So they know something that you don't know. Why didn't it say the so-called Negroes, which is so-called Negroes would be the so-called black people that you know today, right? And the so-called Native Americans and the so-called um, Mexicans, right? It says dark races. It says not the Negroes, but the Egyptians. So when you think about Egyptians, right? Give me 1 second. Let me show you something. Right, so this movie 10 Commandments, which they play every Easter on purpose to further indoctrinate you, right? Because you keep seeing something consistently that's gonna indoctrinate your mind without you really knowing. It's gonna indoctrinate your subconscious mind. But let's stick to this point. But this supposed to be the Egyptians in the movie, but you see they have been whitewashed, right? Let me see if I can pull some more right here. This supposed to be Moses, if I'm not mistaken, right? But it's been whitewashed, and I found out that they spray tanned themselves in this movie. So I'm gonna do that lesson a whole nother day, right? So sticking on the subject, when you think about the Egyptians, remember let's go back into the scholarship of this, right? So you won't say I'm making anything up, right? So the scholars know what time it is, but you don't know. It says Ham, the youngest son of Noah, born probably about 96 years before the flood, and one of 8 persons to live through the flood. He became the progenitor of the dark races, not the Negroes, but the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites. Egyptians, what I want to focus on. Dark races. So the Egyptian had dark flesh. But when you see the modern day in these artwork, these movies, these cartoons, they in the image of the so-called white man because he wants to be the people out of the Bible. He's a liar, right? So let's go here, and I'm gonna show you in scripture where Paul and Moses got mistaken for an Egyptian. So this when you go to Moses, this what they got right here. See, Moses, another whitewash, fraudulent image. It says Moses with the tablets of the law. This was created in 1624. So these paintings are relatively new art, right? It says by Gaudio Renai. One second, let me click on this. Right, so let's see who this guy is. And the spirit been on me to go into these Edomite painters during the Renaissance, which means rebirth. It says Guido Reni, if I said that correct, was an Italian painter. Well, there you go. So you had Leonardo da Vinci, you had Donatello, right? Raphael and Michelangelo, right? These was the most famous painters that start whitewashing history, right? So let's go back. This is our lies right here. Let's go to this definition right here. This is a more clear-cut definition, right? I know some of our people just don't get it. It says Ham, right? The youngest son of Noah, born probably 96 years before the flood. It says one of 8 persons to live through the flood. He became the progenitor of the dark races, not the Negro, not the blacks, but the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites. So he was the progenitor of the dark races, but not the so-called blacks, because the so-called blacks come from the seed of Shem, right? Right, so let's go back. But when you go to these images, this all so-called white people. So let's get into the scriptures, right? This is the book of Acts 21 and 37. Let me make sure. 21, jump down to 37 so you can get the context. It's the book of Acts 21 and 37. It says, and as Paul, so it's dealing with Paul, was to be led into the council, he said unto the chief captain, may I speak unto thee? Who said, canst thou speak Greek? So he was taken back, right? Because he saw the appearance of Paul. He looked like a so-called Egyptian, which the Israelites were so-called black men. It says 38, are not that Egyptian? Well, I just went into that definition and show you that the Egyptians were dark-skinned people. It says, which before these days made us an uproar and led us into the wilderness, 4,000 men that were murderers. So Paul got mistaken for an Egyptian. But why? Because of his skin complexion, right? But this ain't what you shown in history. This is nothing but lies. Let's go back. To the Apostle Paul, they got him whitewashed. Let's go here. Right here. This is all a forgery, right? This is false, right? This was created, in relatively modern terms, right, during the Renaissance. Let's go to Exodus. So Moses got mistaken for an Egyptian as well. And they gave you this movie 10 Commandments to indoctrinate your mind. Let's go to Exodus 2. Let me see where I need to go to. Give me 1 second. This is the book of Exodus 2 and 17. It says, and the shepherds came and drove them away. But Moses, so what's the conversation piece? Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. 18. And when they came to Ruel, their father, he said, how is it that ye are come so soon today? All right, 19. It says, and they said, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us and watered the flock. So Moses got mistaken for an Egyptian. So let me go back and show you this. So you won't say I'm making anything up. Ham, the youngest son of Noah, born probably 96 years before the flood, one of 8 persons to live through the flood. He became the progenitor of the dark races, not the blacks, but the Egyptians, dark races and Egyptians. There you go. All right. So when you go to the word Ham, it gives you a clue to what is really going into Ham. It says means hot or sunburnt. Sunburnt. When you look at a Hamite, you know they are very dark skinned, dark brown, chocolate brown, right? In some cases, right? So when you go to this modern day Google, internet, it's all modern day witchcraft. Let me go here. Let me show you something real quick. But I didn't want to make this too long, and I had did a lesson similar to this, but I wanted to kind of touch back up on it because this heavy indoctrination and whitewashing has been heavy on our people's mind. And that's why Jake don't consider them being Israelites, because when they think about the Bible, they think about the Bible being a so-called white man book. Why would they think that? Because of the images they saw growing up. Witchcraft, right? So the Hebrew Israelites, where we descend from, I've showed you irrefutable proof that they were so-called black men, right? And when you see these modern day movies, these literature, these books, these cartoons, these magazines, these biographies, documentaries, they all been whitewashed. What does whitewash mean? It's when they show all the characters to be so-called white people, right? And they take dark images and make them look like them. The first Maccabees 3 and 48, right? But I'm gonna call a lesson. Hopefully this lesson was edifying. Call Allah Yahweh Bahashim Yahushua Bahashim Rachak Kodash. Shalom.